I found my love at Avalon, by the sea, by the beautiful scene. And here we begin. We all know Catalina Island as the resort city of 1,000 golf carts, but before it became the playground of drunk beach lovers and frugal birthday boys and girls, it was just an island. Cut to 20 million BC. The island was pushed out of the ocean sometime between then and 5 million years ago, around when Jurassic Park came out. This was promotion for the premiere of Jurassic Park.
This is Jurassic Park Catalina. I mean, part 2 of Jurassic Park came close enough to being Jurassic Park Catalina anyways. I don't know why it's not even a joke.
So it's 2 miles long, 8 miles wide at its fattest, and 1 mile wide at its skinniest.
Who's it describing?
Now, if that isn't a figure I could get behind. So it covers a total of some 47,884 acres, with its highest point being Mount Orizaba at 2,097 feet high. The whole thing, it's 26 miles off the coast from San Pedro.
All right, so it's a half-hour drive.
Yeah. Just hit the wharf and keep on driving.
You have to hit it at 120 miles per hour just to make it like a couple miles.
If you can do the calculations, you can get there in your own car.
If you can get flight from your car, you'll make
That's
it.
how the people who have cars there, that's how they got them there. They launched off Port Sakal.
That big bridge that guy jumped off
Yes, Edmund Pettus or whatever. What is it?
Tony Scott?
No, not the person. Isn't the bridge called
I don't remember.
It's not the Edmund Pettus bridge. That's the bridge from Selma, isn't it? What's the name of that bridge?
I have no idea. I said it before and I don't remember because I don't remember anything.
Well, you don't care about civil rights. It's home to many plants and animals, including 60 species that aren't found anywhere else in the world, such as the Catalina Island gray fox.
Ooh. It's called the Rich Ben.
It's also known as Robert Altman. Let's get the mystery of these bison out of the way. Not native animals to the island.
What? What does that mean?
They didn't spring from the earth like Rocky and Bullwinkle at the beginning. You mean
animals from the Midwest didn't just appear on an island? I'm confused.
Tell me about it. That this wasn't a chunk blown out from Yellowstone? So they were brought over in 1924 for the filming of the movie The Vanishing American. They brought 14 of them on a boat for the movie, but in the middle of the production, they ran out of money, so they couldn't afford to bring them back to the mainland, so they just left them there. And they did what most people go to Catalina for and got down to making offspring.
And eating grass.
Yeah, grass, offspring, or cash, or whatever. They control the population, but at its highest in 1987, there were 527 bison on the island. They brought in new bison from elsewhere and taken away others pretty regularly to prevent inbreeding. So as of today, there's around 150 living on the island, including one who gored a guy last year.
Wait, I thought Gordagai was a word.
Yeah, you don't know Gordagai?
Mordecai, brother. Mordecai's brother.
Mordecai Gordagai. As for people, there are traces that Catalina Island has been inhabited for over 10,000 years, starting around the year 8000 BC, in case you forgot what year we were in.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention.
I thought we were back in 5 billion BC. Obviously, we don't know a lot about the first people or how they got there, but throughout all those years, there have been different groups that have come and gone. We don't know who most of them are. The last native tribe, though, to live there, we do know a little bit about. They were called the Pimuvit or the Pimungans. They were called that because they called the island itself Pimu.
Do we know what that means?
It means Catalina Island. Yeah. So their main village was where Avalon now is, as we seem to do. We see, hey, they got a good village set up. Let's put heavier houses on it.
The first question of every conqueror. What's that?
This main village, they called it Pimunga also. And they worshipped a god named Chinik, who was one of 3 forms of a god who also went by a name we might be more familiar with, Quowar.
Oh, yeah.
Who was the same god that many other tribes in the region who they believed in, making the Pimuvit part of the general tribe we now know as the Gabrielino or Tongva or Keech. So they're all related.
Okay.
Not literally, but they're all
cousins of
they're all
tribal cousins.
They're all related, not literally. They're cousins.
They're cousins.
So they lived mostly off the fly fish and the abalone and sea lions that were abundant around the island. They found mounds of abalone shells that were piled 10 feet high. Clam bake. A favorite food they had was called islay, which was the kernel of a type of plum that grew on the island. English-speaking people later called it mountain cherry, which is where the name Cherry Valley comes from, which is on the island. None of this makes sense to you because
I haven't been there.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been reading some of these words in books.
I've heard of plums.
I'm like Rumpelstiltskin. No, what's the princess?
I'm like Rumpelstiltskin. I'll spin gold for you.
Is it Rapunzel? Just looking at the world from the window?
Well, you wish you were Rapunzel.
All people want to be Rapunzel so bad.
There's 2 types of people in this one. People who want to be Rapunzel, and then there's Rumpelstiltskin.
Guess which one you are.
So the plants on the island weren't very helpful nutrition-wise, aside from the cattail whitetail and chia, so they needed to trade with other tribes. So that meant that they needed a way to get off the island, which they had in the form of long canoes called teots, which were made of redwood.
They were really long, right?
Yeah, they were held together by plant ropes. They could fit 30 people at a time. Like that's like a party bus.
Yeah, that's a party bus.
That's a Hummer canoe.
Only 2 people needed to go. The rest were a band that was playing.
They also could fit a jacuzzi in it. The really nice ones, though.
No questions asked. International waters, even back then.
Just get 10 feet off the shore, anything goes. So 30 people would get into these canoes, and it was like the Olympics. They would row 26 miles to get to the mainland or to the other Channel Islands, which also had people living on them. They would trade their seafood and their shell beads and the fetishes they made from quartz, and they would get food and supplies that they needed back on the island. The thing they were really known for, though, was these bowls that they would make. So the island has this natural resource of soapstone, which is really soft, so they were able to make all these bowls out of it, and these were found amongst tribes all along the coast.
Oh, so they're trading with everybody.
Yeah, they had an extensive trade network. All these bowls could be traced back to Catalina Island.
That was the first Catalina swap meet.
Yeah. It now takes place in the Rose Bowl, which is made out of soapstone. They even used the soapstone to make these sort of like carved paintings that people cut out. So they were trading like art. Like they would make
I made this for you.
Yeah, what is still being done on the island today, pretty much. Like it's an artist colony. Yeah. So much later on in 1899, I'm going to jump around a little bit. Yeah. All right, we're done. I jumped to the end.
2022.
So much later on in 1899, the Americans set up a sawing plant at the soapstone quarry at Empire Landing, and they shipped it throughout the city. So a lot of old buildings in LA had this soapstone as a finishing on the fronts of it, because when you polished it, it would look really nice and kind of like color, like kind of green. These colors would come out of it. One building that had this on the front was the old City Hall.
Really?
It was finished on the front with soapstone from Catalina Island. So like I said, it was a vast trading network, and they were doing really well. There were about 1,000 natives living on Catalina. They were doing just fine until October 7th, 1542.
There's a day.
October 7th, 1542, that was the day the Pimuvit had their first contact with Europeans in the form of the famous Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo and his ship, the San Salvador.
What's that?
So they were searching for a passage to the Far East, Cabrillo's ship. They found this. They found Catalina Island, or Pimu, and the Pimuvit greeted them warmly, because
they didn't
why
know
wouldn't
better.
they?
They didn't know what was about to come.
They didn't know hatred yet. So Cabrillo and his men stayed for 12 hours and then claimed the island in the name of the King of Spain, and they renamed it San Salvador after his ship and left. But he seemed to come back repeatedly and use the island as his base for exploring the other Channel Islands. Yeah. About a year after this first contact, Cabrillo broke his leg in a skirmish with some of the natives on one of the islands, and he died on San Miguel Island, but it's believed that he's buried somewhere on Catalina Island, which is kind of weird. This is what's weird. After that, the Pimuvit had no contact with Europeans for 60 years. That's just such a weird memory for people to have to recall to their grandkids. Like these white creatures showed up 60 years ago. Yeah, right. That never happened.
Come on, Grandma.
Then the second contact was November 24th, 1602, with the ship of another Spaniard named Sebastian Vizcaino.
I read this story, and it's...
What did you read?
He came, he carved a face into one of their sacred statues, and he shot a raven, which they thought was important.
I don't know if that was him, but we'll get to the raven. I don't know about this face carving thing, though. I think you made that up, because I think you still crave attention during my stories. But yeah, we'll get to that crow
Why
story.
aren't I talking?
I want to carve my face on this story. So Vizcaino seemed to think he was the first European to discover the island, so he decided to give it yet another name. So he had arrived the day before St. Catherine's Day, so he decided to rename the island in honor of her, calling it Santa Catalina, and for some reason that stuck forever. He stayed on the island for about 2 days and then left, leaving the locals with another weird memory of white people for close to 200 years. That's insane. Like that
was the fastest they can come back.
I know. We'll be back.
ASAP, which is 200 years.
It's that sort of thing that, like, when you hear certain alien stories, imagine someone 198 years after this contact hearing the story of, like, people with white skin came once. Like, right. That doesn't exist.
That doesn't happen.
Like, what if aliens did come 200 years ago, and at this point it's like, right.
It's also weird that we can, that's like 8 generations of people or something.
It's crazy. The United States is barely older than that.
Yeah, and then we, like, try to sum it up in books, like, and then nothing happened for 600 years. Like, are you kidding me?
I know. It all really happened when the Spanish came. But even before that, they've been living there for 10,000 years. Something happened.
And we summed it up like, that's 10,000 years.
I know. So in 1769, the island was yet again discovered by another Spaniard named Gaspar de Portola, and it was the same year that the first mission in Alta California was built.
So here we go.
Yeah, with fast-track destruction. Here we go. So the population on Catalina Island was physically decimated due to the disease diseases that more regular contact with the Spanish brought, and their way of life was decimated with the new mission way of life. It destroyed their trade network that they had developed all along the coast. That's
so
done.
The communal living at their own expense own people.
But that didn't hit them yet, because...
Are they still isolated, though?
They're still isolated, but they can no longer trade, really.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
You'll see what happens.
I see what you mean, though.
So, no, you don't see. Not yet.
You haven't lived it.
They could no longer trade for what they needed with the other tribes, as most of the other tribes were being absorbed by the missions because they were on the mainland, and the missions were supplied by Spanish ships for the most part. So with the Pimuvit already smaller in numbers, they could no longer live off of the island. So they had to move off the island and live in the missions or work on ranches, either by choice or by strong suggestion.
They were cut off and then imprisoned by proxy. Like, because everyone else was in prison, they were also like had this like a sub prison. Like, now we're on the island.
It was almost like a blockade of Catalina Island.
Exactly, yeah.
According to some stories, the Spanish, here we're getting to the crow now, the Spanish actively, I don't know if it's true or not, but they were actively sent to destroy the false idols of the Pimuvit. So these soldiers came to the island, they destroyed a temple there that was a place to worship the sun. It was a circular temple with a lot of colorful tiles with a figure in the center representing the sun and the moon, around which they may or may not have made sacrifices of birds. So then, this is what you're thinking of. The Spaniards came in, they saw these two giant crows inside, and they immediately assumed they were the devil, so they shot at them, which did not create goodwill with the natives. So that's your crow story.
They come and they're like, well, that's a dumb superstition, but those crows are the devil. Like, that's too...
This temple's dumb. Where's the holy water? Where's the water that makes you God or whatever? I don't know what happened. So in 1803, they even considered putting a mission on the island, because 1803, there were 400 Pimuvit living on it, and they thought it might be worthwhile. But in just 2 years, over 200 of them died from measles, and they decided it wouldn't be worth it to them because the population was too small, and they wanted to keep all the missions on the mainland.
I almost said, like, good luck getting all the lumber to build a mission across the ocean in canoes, but then I thought, well, they would just make them do it.
They would fell the whole island to build whatever they needed.
They would drain the ocean just to get to it.
The population on the island kept going down and down and down, and by 1807 there were only 40 to 50 Pimuvit still on the island. So this number drop was a combination of them moving off the island. Many of them died from disease. There was even one story that probably isn't true, but that some Russian pelt hunters that were in the area killed a huge number of them to take the fur that they had. This probably didn't happen on Catalina, but there is proof that there was a huge massacre by the Russians on San Nicolas Island.
Really?
Like, they found a lot of natives with bullet holes in their temples.
Jeez. I didn't know that the Russians had done that. I know that they were here, and the reason the Spanish wanted to come to Los Angeles is to beat the Russians here. Well, the story that continues to this day.
The Spanish and Russian war for California rages on.
But I didn't know that they were attacking the native population.
Why wouldn't they?
They're invaders. Why wouldn't they?
They were here to take their fur.
Yeah, and they had guns.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't... Like, that's two reasons.
Yeah. We have guns and you have fur. By 1820, there were no Pimuvit left living on Catalina Island. All that was left was burial sites and scattered relics, which the future residents of the island just couldn't even leave those alone. So this is where I'm going to jump ahead a little. In 1881, a 15-year-old boy named Ralph Glidden moved to Catalina with his family. He grew up to be a carpenter on the island, but one day he was looking for some pearls by the beach, and he stubbed his toe on a skull that was sticking out of the ground from a native burial site, and he developed an interest in archaeology.
Oh my God, this is your daydream. This is you. This is the person you want to be.
No, don't lump me in with this guy.
I found a bone, it's a skull, and I want to go to college.
This is, if I grew up in a trailer. This guy who didn't graduate from high school started referring to himself as Dr. Glidden, and in 1915 he started digging up as many Pimuvit burial sites as he could find on the island and catalog their bones and relics. So he dug up hundreds of these burial sites from Catalina and a few other Channel Islands, and then in 1918 he sold his entire collection to the Hay Foundation of the Museum of the American Indian in New York. But the next year, when Wrigley bought the island, he made this sort of digging off limits to anybody but professionals who got approval. He gave the digging rights on the island to the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, who then made a deal with the Hay Foundation to do the actual digging, and those two museums would split the findings. And lucky for the Hay Foundation, they had a contact who was already kind of working for them on the island, so they hired Glidden to dig. So he started digging again. So he started digging up all the burial sites, and he claimed to have excavated over 801 grave sites from 105 locations on the island. But in 1922, they reduced his funding, and in April 1924, they cut it completely. So now Glidden had no way of making money. So what he decided to do was open up a museum in a giant tent, and he charged 35 cents to come in to see all of these bones and tools that he dug up. He called it the Catalina Museum of Island Indians, museums, and this was the first museum on Catalina Island, that's something.
I got a better name for that. Grave robber's tent.
I know. Once he moved out of that tent and into an actual building, he didn't just have the bones on display. He had them arranged in designs a la Ed Gein. The windows were lined with toe, ankle, wrist, and finger bones.
What a ghoul.
Yeah, he used leg and arm bones to hold up the shelves. There were vertebrae all over the ceiling. And remember, the families of the people whose bones these used to be most likely didn't even know this was happening. And if they did, of course, they did not give permission to this. It was completely unethical and disrespectful. And going along with the Ed Gein comparison, people referred to it as cultural cannibalism. But of course, most people at the time didn't feel that way. Locals referred to Glidden as Uncle Ralph. Some called him King Ralph. And the museum was open until 1950. His eventual plan for the museum, which thank God it never happened, was to build a 16-foot skull on top of the museum so that the first thing you'd see when you were pulling up to the island was a giant skull.
Welcome to Skull Island. It's a resort.
What do they got in there? King Kong? Jurassic Park. 5 billion years ago.
I know that you came up in Chicago, Wrigley, but why would you send the remains of Native Americans from California to Chicago?
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. Like, there's a natural history museum in Los Angeles. Yeah. That was weird.
Yeah.
But also,
these things belong in a museum.
These things belong in a museum in Chicago.